Lux Occult is part of the Green Mushroom Podcast Network.
Now the heart sings with its thousand voices, to hear this city of cells, my body sing. The tree through the stiff clay at long last forces its thin, strong roots, and taps the secret spring. And the sweet waters without intermission climb to the lips of its green tenement. The breasts have borne the grace of their possession. The lips have felt the pressure of content. Here I come home, in this expected country. They know my name and speak it with delight. I am the dream, and you my gates of entry, the means by which I waken into light. That is The Gateway by A.D. Hope. Hello and welcome to Lux Occult. This is the podcast where we gleefully taunt the mundane, butcher the Latin and most other languages, and also discuss a variety of occult, esoteric, and adjacent topics. Exploring the intersections of magic, science, art, philosophy, technology, and so much more through the lens of chaos magic, this is occultism for everyone. I'm your host, Lux Estrada, and if you're hearing the sound of my voice right now, that means that this show, and magic for that matter, are for you if you want them. There are a lot of different ways to be more free in the world, and using magic or making space for a spiritual practice in your life can be one of them. As always, I don't speak for anybody but myself. People can, will, and should disagree sometimes with the things that I or my guests say on this show. How we ever learn anything if we were all in agreement on all things at all times after all. Unlike those who attempt to be reasonable should be willing to do, I often will revise my opinions or thoughts about things based on new evidence. I'm very excited to share the conversation I recorded with Marcella Kroll, author of the new book, Healing the Liminal. What does it mean to exist in several liminal spaces, as Marcella identifies as doing? And what might we do within our magical or spiritual practices to resolve or heal the tension or pain that we might find in this liminality? Marcella will share with us about how through techniques she developed in writing the book, she was able to make contact with lost ancestors and even family members in some cases, first in a magical space and then in the real world. People who are regular listeners to this show or who are into chaos magic, esoterica stuff might be inclined to contextualize the family tree technique that Marcella will outline in Healing the Liminal, and it will talk about today in the interview, as a type of hypersigil, which is a sort of ongoing artistic project carried out with a magical intent that has magical tethers between itself and the actual world, would be one way of putting that concept in a nutshell. With a hypersigil, things begin in a creative artistic space before iterating in some actualized way in the real world. As we will see in the interview, Marcella doesn't necessarily refer to the family tree technique as a type of hypersigil, but it might be easier for some people to get their heads around what's sort of going on there magically by using that term. As always, we must decide for ourselves what is the most appropriate language to use when describing or thinking about what we do in our own magical, spiritual, or artistic practices. So in addition to the family tree, Marcella and I are going to talk about dragon energy, toxic empathy, the key as a symbol, what does it mean to discover there are experiences in your lineage, and a lot of other interesting things. Lots to get into here today, but before we hop into my chat with Marcella Kroll, let me quickly remind you that if you like the show or the other work I've been getting into, you can support it on Patreon. If you do so, you can take a bibliomancy break with me. There are no tiers or levels or whatever for the time being, so give as you will. Buy Me a Coffee is also an option for those who wish to show their support with a one-time donation and don't want to do the whole Patreon thing. There are also some new items available from Illumin Industries, which is my Etsy shop. You can find Hello Void and Hypho Sigil and Cultivate Consent items. These things will be printed on demand and shipped directly to you. Thank you so much to everybody who is supporting the show in whatever way that means. Your support makes the show possible by allowing me to cover the expenses associated with making it, thereby justifying to myself the time that I spend. The support is especially helpful as demand for my time and energy increases due to some cool new life developments. I really do appreciate the opportunity to be making this thing, and having the resources necessary to reach you all today is a huge part of that. So many thanks for the support, which is making the show possible. Thank you also for listening. That is a huge part of support as well, so thank you for being here. Although I'm a pretty introverted person, I don't use social media very much because of this. I'm not like there checking on things all the time or anything like that, but that certainly doesn't mean that I don't want to hear from you all or anything. I'm beyond lucky to have such amazing listeners, collaborators, cohorts, co-conspirators, etc. I always welcome people's thoughts, questions, comments, suggestions, or arcane revelations for the mailbag segment. You can reach me at luxoccultpod@gmail.com. You can hit me up on Instagram at luxoccultpod, or you can find me on Blue Sky Social at luxestrada919. All right, so Marcella Kroll, from her website, it says, is a dynamic and visionary multi-hyphenate celebrated for her transformative work as a multiracial autistic artist, intuitive teacher, occult practitioner, and author. Since 2009, she has built a thriving career in tarot readings and spiritual guidance, blending her profound knowledge of tarot, astrology, and divination to empower personal transformation. Marcella's artistic and mystical talents are widely recognized. Her ethereal artwork, exhibited nationally, forms the backbone of her acclaimed divination decks, praised for their unique symbolism, accessibility, and striking design. For 14 years, she has exclusively taught tarot for teens in collaboration with the Los Angeles Public Library, fostering intuitive and creative skills in young people. Fuck yeah. Her contributions extend beyond teaching and art. Marcella's influence is further amplified by her notable work in Priestess, the Tarot book by Tashin, and Healing the Liminal, which is what we'll be talking about today. Her artwork is also part of the permanent collection at the Rhode Island School of Design Museum. So for context for y'all listening today, Marcella was accompanied by her sleeping pug dog when we did the interview, so don't be alarmed if you hear him snoring a few times while we chat. It's always nice to have a little podcasting buddy around. I have a couple of my own. All right, well, fuck yeah. I'm so excited to share our chat. I'll be back after the interview to share some listener mail and updates about some cool things coming up. But now, without further ado, let's get into it. Here is my chat with Marcella Kroll. All right, well, my guest today is Marcella Kroll. Marcella, how's it going?
Hi, I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm doing all right. I'm glad that it is Friday as we are speaking. Fuck yeah, excited for the weekend, excited to
Yes.
light the candle and everything later. But we are here to talk about your book, Healing the Liminal.
Yes, it's my new book. It's coming out February 11th, officially everywhere. But yeah, it's starting to make its way out into the world. It's very exciting, also terrifying, but exciting.
Right on, that makes sense. So I was
Mhm.
thinking maybe we could start out with just talking about like liminality and the context that you've kind of brought. Because I think that I usually like to have people sort of introduce themselves in whatever context that comes up in. And I think
Mhm.
liminality, as you kind of pointed out in the book, is a big part of this.
I definitely identify as like a liminal being in the sense that there's so many ways to relate that. So one, I'm a multiracial person. I'm autistic on the autism spectrum, and I'm a medium, like a hereditary medium. So I'm also like it's about being in those in between spaces and places, those thresholds, but they don't really form, So liminality can be the dream space and even just as a being like occupying a physical vessel but living in a liminal way, right, not fitting in one box or another. So with my work, I first and foremost identify as an artist and an oracle, for lack of a better term, but I think that it leans into that ability to float in and out but never really knowing where to land or anchor in for too long. So the book in itself was kind of like a labor of love to offer some support to those that might feel a little bit like lost in those loose places, but still wanting to honor where they come from and put some perspective and some healing around it. Because a lot of times when you try to lean into the different parts of self, it's hard to find comfort or support or even camaraderie. But I think there's more people than we know that identify with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And I really felt like reading your book, I was sort of along with you on what felt like a really kind of brave and interesting and cool journey. And I just wanted to say how much I appreciate that. There's some very interesting and cool stuff in there.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, it's the most personal thing I've written to date, or like the most kind of sharing. It's like the biggest overshare of my life, I think, in this book. But it felt like I needed to be that forward with what I wanted to share, just because otherwise, who's going to relate to it? If they can't actually hear a story that actually connects to something that they may have experienced, or striking a chord with them around that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe we should talk a little bit about the exercises in the book and some of the work that you've done in getting in contact with some ancestors.
Yeah, thank you for asking that, because no one's asked me about that yet. And one of the biggest the biggest premise of this book, like what made it into a book, was over the years I searched for biological family. I was adopted by my stepfather when I was 5, and I didn't know my biological father. And there was always like this kind of want and call to like find where I came from, but not really sure what that would do. I just thought it would resolve some kind of healing within me. It took me until my early 40s to find him, but a lot of it was through these kind of ancestor veneration, and then developing kind of practices to help connect with those relatives. Like the ancestor tree was something that I feel like my creative brain was like, I need to make something that I can work with tangibly and have it on my altar. And that was like a huge turning point for me, in terms of like, magic has always been there, and magic and the occult has always been like, a supportive tool. But this was the first time I was really, aside from creating my decks, like my oracle decks and my tarot deck, this was the first time I was like, okay, I have an idea. I'm going to make this tree and draw it out. And even though I don't have all their names, I'm going to still connect them on the tree. So I wrote like my mother's name, and I wrote like the names of the people I did have an awareness of. And then for everyone I didn't know, I just wrote ancestor, 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 ancestor. And then I put it on my altar with a candle that was dressed specifically to venerate ancestors. The candle burned for a few days, and then it was done. I was contacted by a third cousin out of nowhere who was like, who are you? And then there were like 4 or 5 more cousins. And it was all these people I had never known. They all had the same last name. They all looked the same. I was the one that looked very different. And it was one of those things where I feel like my call to my ancestors and my connecting it to the physical, like created almost like a telephone kind of line. So I started kind of coming together with these different kinds of practices, because I would go into spaces where I knew kind of like culturally, like I was a lineage of, but like I had no business being there. Or people would be like, why are you here? What are you doing? And I thought, like, how do you make a space for yourself when you're told you don't belong here, or you don't fit in here, or you're not enough of this, or you're not enough of that? So how do we do it respectfully? So that was a lot of the methods of these exercises that are in the book, was like finding things that can be accessible for many people, but also with appreciation, not appropriation.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
Sure.
It's coming to mind that I asked the members of my community if they had any questions for you when I spoke, and one person asked, as somebody who is fully adopted, if you had any thoughts about working with ancestors. And I'm guessing maybe that sort of the things that you've outlined already might prove promising. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, I think the beauty of being adopted is that you have your biological ancestors, but you also have the ancestors that you were adopted into, right? So I think there is this extension that you can reach out into those realms, and I do think there's also this concept, and we need to like remember there are our elevated ancestors, and there are unwell ancestors, you know, and we shouldn't like exclude any of them, but we should kind of like go to the ones that we need help with, and then also bring that healing back to those unwell ancestors that could use our support. And I think when you're adopted, you can still reach out into the ethers to those ones that you don't know. Because I used to have dreams about my great grandmother, and I would see her vividly, and I'd be like, who is this woman that I keep dreaming about? It was so trippy to me. And then when I did find my biological father, And I was able to find some, like, I was given some photos, like really old photos. I was like, oh my gosh, that's the woman I used to dream about. So I think they make their presence known, even if you don't know them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Sure.
The concept, and this kind of ties in with possibly unwell ancestors, possibly not, but the concept of dragon energy comes up. And I was hoping
Yeah.
we could talk a little bit about what that is, because there was a sort of resonance that it struck with me in regard to some of my own ancestors and some of the things that I'm trying to heal about
Mhm.
myself in regards to them and like put that dragon energy to good use when it comes up or whatever, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think the most beautiful thing about dragon energy is it's unfortunate that it's so misunderstood, right? Like I think the dragon energy is potent, it's powerful, it's magical, it's mystical. It doesn't follow the status quo in the sense of it's too big for the room, you know? Like you can't be a dragon and be in dragon energy and be small. And the problem with that is a lot of people will try to make dragons really small. And what happens when you don't cultivate the reverence of a dragon is it can be a disaster, right? Or it's like I don't know, you always hear of these like villains origin stories. Like that's what it kind of reminds me of too. Like it gets a lot of times, even in fairy tales, where does the dragon get regulated to? To like a dark cave and everyone's trying to slay it and kill it. And it's like, it's just trying to live its life. And it can be the most supportive ally, right? And pathfinder and way shower and revolutionize things, and yet we're scared of it. We're scared of how big it is, and particularly there's in the dragon story, I speak about my great grandfather who was a trailblazer for his time, but he had a lot of anger and he had a lot of resentment, and rightfully so. I feel like he also had a lot of things that never were fostered within him, like gifts, talents, challenges, a lot of things that he had to put aside to survive. And that dragon, they always tried to contain it, and even his own mother, to help him like survive. And it was of the times, like they're like, you don't do that. Men don't get this upset. They don't cry. They don't do this. And then double problems because he was a Wampanoag, like, and black man. So it was like be seen but not heard, and he had a lot of fire in him. So it's hard, right? When you have all this to offer and then everyone's saying, it's too much, it's too much, it's too much. And I always think about that even with myself. Like, I feel like, dragons aren't made. That is one of the things I really think. I think dragons are born. I think that there's always a dragon and some sort of like part of the family tree as the one who's supposed to come and like shake things up a little bit. They might be seen as difficult or unruly, but also the trailblazer, they're the ones that are bringing the healing into the family. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and my own sort of thinking about this too, the context of a lot of like systemic issues came up in terms of like how this ancestor's dragon energy wasn't able to be channeled into
yes.
like appropriate places and how that ended up being a destructive thing where
Yeah.
it could have, if it would have been given a good outlet, been an incredibly powerful and generative and healing thing.
Yeah, exactly. It's just time and time again, it's going to keep coming up. I think that's why I think like the dragon, like those lineages, like don't die out. They keep coming until someone has enough support or actually is removed from those environments that kind of shrink them. And I think that even in a way, like for my own life, I think like there were a lot of things I did not feel a part of, but what would have happened if I did? Like there's a lot of things I would have never done in my life simply because I would have stayed in environments and situations that kind of celebrated like me not doing anything. And instead, there was just like a fire inside of me that I couldn't. And I think that's a lot for dragon energy. It's like an unexplainable fire within to keep going. I've had anger and rage almost destroy me, like it did my great grandfather. But I also think that I'm in a place where I've been fortunate enough I do think, and this is like kind of more of a abstract thought, but I do think that future me helped younger me out a lot, particularly when I look at like sending healing down the timeline. I think a lot of the work that I've done and I'm continuing to try to do as an adult with intention of intentionally sending it back to my younger self helped me make better choices, or even split second choices that altered everything.
Oh,
So
yeah, absolutely. I love this idea, and I kind of use it in my own practice as well. Like the idea of I have a sort of mental image of three of me. Like there's one in the past, there's one now, and then there's one in the future. And the more often I send back help to the past, the more confident and sure I can be that help from the future is also coming, and I can feel, encouraged by that as well. So I love this idea. Hell yeah.
yes, definitely. Your own dragon energy, right? Like, do you feel like you've got that connected into your own roots?
Yeah, I do. And I feel like, at least for me, there's so many places, as I mentioned, that it was like this really kind of systemic thing that was part of the reason why my ancestors' dragon energy ended up becoming pretty toxic and in many ways harmful. And I do think that the work that I do to sort of use that dragon energy to push against those systems that I see that were not allowing my ancestor to like really kind of step into their fullness, like that feels like healing that I can accomplish in this world and in the next a little bit, perhaps. So I like it.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's great.
So there was a phrase that really stuck with me as I read, and this kind of, I think it comes up in pretty early in the book, but you mentioned the idea of toxic empathy.
I think toxic empathy can also there's a few functions for it or reasons why it can come up. One, it can come up as a way of centering ourselves, right? But I think it's also a survival motive. Like, it's a survival. It ensures that we have a place. We're always reliable. We're always dependent on, like we can become the crutches for other people in that empathy. But I've seen it like present itself in a few ways. And I think learning how to learn the difference between having compassion and empathy before it turns into toxic empathy is that's what I tell people is the biggest challenge, I think, when they're learning more about their intuition and empathy and like, is that mine? Is that someone else's? When you start taking in things and processing them as your own and it's not your business, that's toxic empathy. Like, and that's one of the things that we have to learn to do when we're like sensitive or intuitive beings. Yes, you can witness the person. Yes, you can empathize or have compassion. But the moment you start making it yours, you take agency away from the person who's having the experience. So I think, like I said, some of us had to learn how to do that for survival because, especially if we grew up in environments where it wasn't safe and you had to ensure that you had a role, right, to keep going. And then in other cases, it's self-obsession, things like that. I don't think it's all one or the other. I think it's a little bit more nuanced, but it's more common than we maybe realize. And I think like as a society, people are getting better about it, but I do think like there's a little bit of an addiction to it, you know? Um,
Yeah, I'm thinking now of like people sort of maybe using it as a means of like trying to fulfill some other emotional need, perhaps.
yes,
Okay.
I think so. Yeah. A lacking or a feeling of something is incomplete or missing and I think we should be able to empathize with each other and have compassion. But there's that fine line, like are you using it to feed yourself something that you think is missing, or are you using it to kind of, again, like stay alive? Like there are other ways you can tune in and how like yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things that relate to it that I've just, you see it in people who, I get it, like you're very affected by things, who wouldn't be? Again, having compassion, it's humanity. You should have compassion. But I don't know. There's again, it's like you don't want to like I just think that sometimes you take it away from the person's experience when you make it about yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's also a point at which you become maybe an enabler where,
Yeah.
that's where you're not, it's not good for anybody in that situation. So
Right,
yeah.
right. Well, and it can be a little bit vampiric, and people
Mm.
wouldn't think of it as being vampiric and like a psychic vampire kind of thing. But if that's all you're feeding on, That's
Yes,
a little bit like messy.
yeah, and I think I'm thinking about how nuanced this is in different contexts that it might appear.
Sure.
And I'm thinking like this in particular, I could see something sort of like vampiric feeling where if it's somebody who's like maybe has a lot of like privilege in the world and they spend a lot of time sort of like, looking at and like, empathizing with, but maybe not doing anything to help people who
Yeah.
are less fortunate.
Yeah,
Like,
they're like kind of it's like optics or virtue signaling, but like at the co like I this is a really kind of a weird example of it, but like I know a girl who is from my hometown, and like the running joke was like if there was ever a funeral, she was there, even if she didn't know your family. Like, and she would be crying along and like upset and like traumatized for you, like devastated to the point where you're like, I'm not crying anymore.
are you
Like
being
it's so
paid to be
confusing.
here?
Yeah,
They
it's
used to
like,
pay people to do that in the ancient world, so
right. But like to the point where it would be like, wait, what is happening? But like that is a little bit like, are you showing empathy and compassion, or are you like chasing other people's pain to feed off of it and to be important and to meet people like when they're most vulnerable and insert yourself? Like that's the kind of stuff that I'm talking about, you know? Like,
yes. Okay. Yeah.
yeah,
Thank you for getting into that with me. That makes a lot of
sure.
sense. Thank you.
Sure, yeah. Yeah.
So the other thing I was hoping we could talk a little bit about was the key as a symbol. And I mentioned to you before we started recording that this is something that comes up all the time with my like Hecate work, but it's a symbol in so many other contexts. Other areas of
Yeah.
my life have it for like different things, and it's such a powerful thing. And it comes up in healing the liminal as well.
Yeah, I mean, I also like always think of Hecate like with the key, but also I my Sacred Symbols Oracle deck, I have the key as one of the cards, and it's the talisman card. And I love the key as a symbol of liminal spaces because it's what gets you from one space to another. It's it's a threshold, right? And in magic, whether you're utilizing a key like on your altar or in spell work, or you're wearing one as a talisman to get you from one place to the other. And that symbolism that you are moving, you're in constant motion, and that responsibility of having a key, to me, that's a huge honor to be able to hold keys because it says that you can be respectful and have reverence for these worlds that you travel between enough to receive one. So they're quite potent, I definitely feel a strong connection to the symbolism of them for sure.
Yeah, right on. I definitely agree. Yeah, the notion that you can use it as something to like open something or protect it, or it's
Right.
symbol of like authority, like you're trusted with this, ability to do that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Well, and also wearing one as like an amulet, to kind of give yourself grace as you're going through maybe transitions. I'm autistic, right? Transitions, I have the hardest time with transitions. People are like, "Oh, you're so good." I'm like, "I'm not though." Like if you give me too many transitions in a day, I have the hardest time. So, like, even thinking of it in that regard, like maybe I'm like connecting with the energy of the key to help me move through these transitions that can be so abrupt. And so you never know what's on the other side of them. The key is quite potent and powerful for that.
Yeah, yeah. There's another
Mhm.
thing that comes up in healing the liminal that I think some of my listeners in particular might be particularly tickled by, because this isn't something that, well, I mean, it is something that we see talked about in some spaces, but not in spaces that look like the one that you've created typically with healing the liminal. And this is
Mm,
kind of the idea of interacting with ancestors who felt like they have this kind of otherworldly connection, and like exploring these connections that might go places other than back in time on our planet, maybe would be one way
right.
of saying it.
Okay. Yeah. Like the ET stuff and the extra, yeah, like galactic kind of things. I mean, I definitely think of space as a liminal space,
Absolutely.
for
Yeah.
sure. I felt like it was so important to put that work in there and talk about it because it's such an important part of my journey, my own contact stories, my own I do identify as an experiencer. I'm actually in a support group for experiencers and abductees. I used to be quite closeted about all of it and only talk to a few people that I knew were in that kind of alien community. But then I started finding more support and more people that like had shared experiences, even though we had never met, and it felt like I kept meeting more people who weren't like the thing with that community is there's a lot of like the same type of person that you would typically see, right? So I for a long time I just was like, no, that's not me. And it can have some connotations that there aren't many people that I felt like safe enough to talk to about it without being like labeled as like out of my mind or tinfoil hat or like, conspiracy theory. But then like over the last, especially the last like 5 years, I've been meeting more and more people who are more open about it. And I just think that we're going to hear more and more of those stories. And then also, that's the other thing. When I met my biological father, he's also had contact experiences. And it turns out that it's been like in the family, like other people in our family, like his lineage, especially, where they were, so I don't know. I just felt like, okay, this is definitely a liminal space that needs to be kind of touched on, maybe not super in depth, like, because there are people already out there talking about it in depth, but let it be a soft opening for people who want to like, maybe it will wake something up in them if they do feel like, okay, maybe I can talk about this stuff, or maybe I can find healing around it. Because not every person has a positive experience with the galactic. Like there are definitely, that's why people say either experiencer or abductee. Abductees are generally people that don't have a positive experience. And it's not that my experience was solely positive. There was definitely some soul crushing kind of experiences. I mean, essentially, I'll share this with your listeners, but like the story in there, Praying to the Aliens, is actually my experiencer story. I changed some of the names in some of the stories because I didn't want people to be thinking about me and losing the point of the story.
That makes sense. Okay,
So,
thank you for explaining. Right on.
yeah. So like Praying to the Aliens, the little girl Marcy, that's me, essentially. But like, I also wanted it to not be about, again, centering me. Like I wanted it to be like a story that you read and you kind of go, ooh, maybe there's something here. Because storytelling is so profound and powerful. And that's how we keep information around. Think about how much we hold in our phones digitally and now we don't remember numbers. It's through the storytelling and the repetition and the sharing and making each other feel seen. That's how we keep things going.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. Thank you. And I
Sure.
really love that you sort of were able to, the way that you're able to sort of like discover these things and then later on find this like physical like proof that the things that the thing about the twins, there's all kinds of things like that. Like
Oof,
it's
yeah.
really cool. Yeah.
Well, yeah, like finding out, like writing a story about, like, or like a poem about a sister, and then finding out I have a sister.
Yeah. Like
Um, just like,
that's wild, like
yeah. Well, just like also the whole thing. I mean, I know it's really like the thing that everybody's talking about right now is like the telepathy tapes. And I'm like, I've been talking about this forever. Like, I just like, I'm glad people are kind of understanding that we do have these like ways of communing. It's also how we communicate with animals. But your ancestors and guides are just like constantly communicating with you, but like we just don't always know or register it. And even when I was younger, for example, I don't know if I mentioned this in the book, but I was like obsessed with Japan, like really wanting to go and but we were poor, we had no money, whatever. I grew up in Rhode Island. There was there wasn't any Japanese people. There was definitely like there was, different communities, but there wasn't a big Japanese community at all. And I couldn't figure out why I was so obsessed, right? And then it's funny, when I did find my dad, I found out he was stationed there for 10 years, and that's where my sister is.
oh
So I
wow.
think there was this part of me, this my inner GPS was like longing for that connection and like knew that was the direction, but didn't have the information to put it there.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense.
hmm So it's always a wild ride, what I find when I'm like putting the pieces together on those like things that pull at me, and even like the feeling of loss, like with the ET stuff, like when the contact stopped at like 8, how sad I got. how depressed I got. And like, I felt abandoned, but like nobody abandoned me, but something abandoned me, and it took me years and years to kind of come back to that. And then I started having visitations again, but that's when I found, you find things when you're ready. I found Yvonne Smith, who she's written multiple books. She started CERO, which is Close Encounters Research Organization. It's just a support group. They've been around for 30 years. And finally got to talk to people that could speak the same language with me and not make me feel like I was out of my mind.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
It's kind of like when I found my magical people, like the magical community. I'm like, oh my gosh, you finally are speaking and there's a difference, right? Like there's a difference between finding people that, they just talk the talk versus people who live it.
Yeah, absolutely. This is probably true of many communities too. I'm thinking
Sure,
back
yeah.
of like some other experiences I've had. I'm like, yes, that is absolutely true.
Yeah. Right. And that's why I hope the book is kind of like a landing pad for people who don't know where to begin. Like I always like, this isn't the end all to be all, but I think I wanted to be able to offer a landing pad or a soft spot for people to start somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, what we can say with what you've presented is that you've done these like exercises that are pretty approachable, I think, that many people would be able to, if they chose to, like explore. And then they've also, at least for you, proven to be very effective and helpful too. So like that combination that's dope. So I love it.
Thanks.
Is
Yeah, I
there
hope so.
is there anything that I haven't asked about that you would like to talk about or mention, or do you have any questions that you would like to ask me?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I would love to know, like, in terms of my favorite thing about this journey is finding other people's stories about times where they felt like they didn't fit in and what they did that made them stand out or feel like they're not fitting in was a plus, was a benefit. So is there any time maybe for you where you felt really empowered by maybe a moment that not necessarily other people would, like a
Yeah.
moment where you felt like you didn't fit in and but like where did you embrace it and how did you show up for yourself?
Yeah, no, thank you. That's a great question. And I think there's a few different things that are coming, but the one that's really, I think, most relevant here is actually has to do with making this show. I
Mhm.
started making it back in 2020. There was this sort of like weird shift that, everybody experienced with the pandemic and like, the quarantines and everything that was going on. And I think that really allowed me to sort of step into something that I really wanted to do for a long time, but really didn't feel like I could do. I had to do a lot of mental gymnastics. I had to sort of create a persona that I could step into because the person that I was not a podcaster yet. I had to pretend to be a podcaster and then start podcasting to become a podcaster. But and I'm sure that that's kind of the process with a lot of things, but I think there was a lot of places in my life where I really didn't feel like there was a lot of space for my voice to be heard. I mean, I'm a
Yeah.
kind of a soft-spoken person. I'm pretty shy, and all kinds of other factors play into that as well. And I have a lot of experience where people will talk over me in rooms, or I'll say something and then somebody else will say the same thing, and people will be like, "Oh yeah, great idea, Bill." And it's like, "Cool, yeah, thanks, Bill." It's okay. And it's just I think, having just really stepping up and deciding to make the show and creating the space for that to happen and, to explore these fun ideas and then through that meet all these cool people and people who were kind of into the same things that I was into talking about because that's what they were listening to on the podcast and everything, and other people that are doing similar work and the rest of it. And so yeah, that's one example that I could think of for sure.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, I think it's really always interesting to find out like those stories, like and what you did because a lot of people don't know the grit and one of the things that comes up when I think with liminal spaces is the imposter syndrome and getting over that and never really getting over it, but like constantly having to kind of, find who you are over and over again and also allowing yourself to evolve. Um, and knowing that that's part of the process too. Like just because you find yourself in one place doesn't mean you stay there. You're going to keep evolving um And that might piss some people off, but that's okay. You're
Yeah.
not living for them, you're living for you. And you're living for the people that you don't even know are watching you. There's been so many times in my life where, I've been, none of this makes sense. Why am I even trying? Why am I doing this? And then 3 years later, I meet someone who's like, you have no idea how much this had an impact. But like, people are shy or people are soft spoken. Nobody, I think if I can say anything to anyone today about anything is, even if I know it's hard sometimes to speak up, but like, if something means something to you, say something. Even if it feels like, oh, they don't need to hear that. I think you should. I think you should. There's too many people that get kind of lost in the shuffle or in the ethers because people we get kind of shy or even busy with our own lives that we just take that moment. I think I've lost a lot of people who kind of were those kind of misfits who didn't fit in, and not enough people told them while they were alive or why before that how much they mattered to them, or even they're things that they would criticize or ridicule themselves about for not being like normal or fitting in, whatever that might be.
Mhm.
And those are the very things that people are admiring or looking up to. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
thank you. That's really beautiful and really helpful. And yeah, definitely hits home. I think, yeah, what you said too about not everybody is gonna like it, when you continue to evolve and change and grow and everything, that's very much the case, but the people that are there to go along with you on that journey, those are the real friends, those are the real allies, those are the real, people to do magic with or whatever. Like, so I think
Mhm.
that can also be a gentle way to kind of like test boundaries too, to see to what extent people are accepting,
Yeah, well, I think the other thing too is, yeah, the more you get comfortable in not masking who you are, I masked for years and years and years, partially because of survival, partially because I didn't even understand the concept of masking until I was diagnosed with autistic. And as a late diagnosis person, I didn't realize how much it would cause so many problems, because suddenly the mask would come off and people would be very upset, thinking like feeling betrayed. And I'm like, no, no, I'm just like trying to make you comfortable, and also survival, again, like, you try to fit in and it just, I don't know, it just never works for me. So, and then with the pandemic, yeah, like I just stopped masking because I was home. I was by myself. It was just me and I have a bearded dragon. It was just me and my lizard the whole time, like doo, doo, doo. Like I couldn't mask if I tried going out, Now I catch myself sometimes doing it, and it's funny, like when it happens, because there will be some friends of mine who I'm close with that are like, you don't have to mask right now, and I'm like, oh, I forgot. Okay. Like, because it's painful. It's painful to be like painfully aware of everything you're doing and knowing that that's going to make other people react. But the right people are like, just be you, It's always a work in progress, you know?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And oftentimes, when people are young, they'll be given a lot of different types of like positive and negative reinforcement, and they'll get a lot of negative reinforcement for acting in ways which are perceived to be like outside of the social norm or whatever. And so that can be internalized in like really sometimes damaging ways and stuff. And yeah, I absolutely.
yeah, it's a painful thing to watch. And honestly, and I have always say this, like when people ask like, well, why are you, who is this for? I'm like, I'm doing everything I do, including like, so I taught tarot for teens for 14 years with the LA Public Library. I like everything I do is because I want to be the person that I wish was there for me when I was growing up. So like you might not like it, but it's not for you. It's for the me that didn't get the support, and in that fumbling of existence, being able to like lend that to someone else, because you never know who you're helping. You never know who might find support in what you're offering. And yeah, it's just trying to just leave things better than the way I found them, quite frankly. So
Wow. Yeah, I love it. Well, Marcel, this has been a really awesome conversation. Thank you so much for hanging out with me this afternoon.
thank you for having me.
Oh yeah, of course. Where can listeners find your work?
So I have a website. It's marcellakroll.com that has, that will have like upcoming events, or I teach classes sometimes online, in person. Has my book tour, which I'm traveling most of February for, listed on there. Instagram is at Marcella Kroll. I have a Blue Sky as well. It's just my name. Most of the things is just my name. So I'm trying. It's hard to do the social media and the things. I always tell people, like, sign up for my newsletter, because that is kind of a place where I'll be consistent. Yeah, so I just, yeah, those, I think, sign up for my newsletter on my website, and yeah, follow me on Instagram. I am not consistent with that stuff, but it's the best way to find out what I've got going on.
All right, fuck yeah, that makes sense. I am not super consistent with social media either. I
Mhm.
find it quite overwhelming and difficult to approach, but I do it. So yes.
Yes.
So would you mind leaving the listeners and I with a couple of last thoughts or some parting words of advice?
I'm like wondering if I should read something maybe from
Sure.
the book or
Yeah.
something,
Oh yeah, that would
just
be
as
dope.
a
That would be
like a
like
little.
perfect.
Oh, why don't I can read the conclusion. It's so wild because I have the physical copies in my hands now, so it's like feeling it and then seeing the
Ooh,
artwork and
looks nice.
everything.
Hell yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so the conclusion is a final thought on traversing the physical as a liminal spirit in a human vessel. It's important to remember that while you cannot change the past, you can redirect the future. Notice I said redirect, not control. There is a call and a response to life that requires us to dance with it. Sometimes circumstances will take the lead and you have to follow. This is not me telling you to give up, especially in the face of cruelty. What I am trying to tell you is that sometimes circumstances will be beyond your means to change. Then there will be other times when you will be guided or even pushed to create the next steps without instruction, no support, no cheerleading, no reference point to look to for assurance. It will sometimes feel unfair to be told to change the world, but not be told how. Without direct guidance or even the most basic encouragement, there will be days when the only clear examples of what to do next will be how not to do it. You may feel despair or even resignation. There will be days when you feel downright hopeless or helpless and so dark in your spirit that leaving this earthly plane seems like the only solution. I can only say that these moments are natural but do pass. Sometimes it can take a few hours or days, and sometimes it can even take months on end. While it seems impossible to see the end of those periods while you're in them, fortunately, they do eventually pass. And as you venture forth, my best wishes accompany you as you discover your path as a liminal being. Unlike those handed a predetermined route to success or a designated place in the tapestry of existence, you have a unique journey of freedom and exploration. Through this autonomy might sometimes induce fear, a sense of isolation, or the absence of support. I want you to know that I and others who share your transformative journey perceive your presence. We yearn for your well-being and embrace you with kindness as you navigate the complexities of this world. Despite the fear it might bring, please recognize that kindred souls and I see and support you. Your story is yours to write. Bearing the legacy of your lineage and diverse incarnations of your spirit, let it be known that you possess the ability to forge your narrative distinct from the norm, and you hold within you the remarkable privilege of preserving the stories of your lineage and the diverse manifestations of your soul. I urge you to tap into the energies of those before you and weave their aspirations into your tapestry of existence. In doing so, you find channels to express both their deepest yearnings and your highest self's vision. As you continue, remember that you are not alone in your journey. Others like you stand in solidarity, weaving their threads into the grand design of existence. Embrace the camaraderie this brings. It is your story to tell and an ode to the evolution of spirit and the legacy of your lineage. May your journey be revitalizing, revolutionary, and replenishing. And may your heart find solace in the beauty of your unique narrative, so you may thrive as you celebrate all and who you are with the world around you. So that is the conclusion.
Fuck yeah. Well, thank you so much. I don't think I don't want to say anything after that. I'm just gonna let that sit. Thank you
Okay.
so much for your generosity today and hanging out, and I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you.
3, Romeo, 2, 4, Yankee, Romeo, 7, Bravo, Delta, Quebec.
All right, thanks so much to Marcella Kroll for joining me. If you're a person who feels like they exist in liminal spaces, or maybe you're curious about getting into some ancestor work but are unsure where to start, check out Healing the Liminal. We heard from Marcella how the intuitive practices she developed ended up being incredibly effective and how they offered a lot in terms of connecting with and healing parts of the self and the family line. You can find links in the show notes and description to Marcella's website and social media stuff and sign up for that newsletter that she mentioned. We have a little bit of listener mail to get into, including some thoughts about the bonus episode with Spencer Sunshine, Satanism and the Far Right, which came out recently. And I wanted to return to some of the themes that Marcella brought up in that very powerful conclusion to Healing the Liminal with some final thoughts. But before we get into it, I wanted to share a few updates about stuff we have planned with the Green Mushroom Hyposigil and Void House, creating consent-centered magical spaces for working both in person and online. The first thing I wanted to mention is that on the 26th of May, this year of Our Lady 2025, via Zoom, I'm going to be hosting a special Memorial Day Deipnon, or Offering Feast to Hecate on the New Moon, in which we will be remembering and honoring ancestors who wish to join us in the fight to turn back the tides of fascism and to fight for equality and democracy. The Greatest Generation and others fought the Nazis during World War II, and we will be calling on them and whoever wants to help us to join with us as we continue on in their footsteps. It will be free to attend, and anybody who feels aligned with our intentions is welcome. The ceremony is going to consist of some original stuff for my Hecatian practice that I wrote and some classic tech which I've adapted for similar purposes. There's also going to be a chance for participants to share thoughts or prayers or poems or whatever about any ancestors that they would like to invite to this party. I'm pretty stoked about it. It's going to be like a barbecue, but with ghosts. I'll put a link to the invite flyer in the show description and notes in case you would like to check that out. On the 23rd of May, we're going to be having a special Fungal Friday chat in which we'll be discussing the themes that we talked about in the Spencer Sunshine episode, Satanism and the Far Right, and kind of talking about what we can as a community and as individuals do about it, and what are our own thoughts and experiences. Another thing that's going to be starting probably in the next couple of months here is an 8-week study course about the headless rite or bornless ritual. This is something that my online community sort of suggested and that I'd also been thinking about wanting to do for a while now. After the most recent iteration of our Persephone Returns from the Underworld ritual, people mentioned wanting to get into the headless rite and sort of being into the idea of adapting it and creating their own versions, as I did and shared as part of that ceremony. So I've been building out what I believe will be a pretty approachable inroad for advanced beginners at magic, I would say, and something which will also be rigorous enough to challenge people who are, maybe more advanced and really want to be challenged. It will also be appropriate for those who just want to sort of observe in a more academic way and aren't really interested in doing the magical work or aren't at a point where they feel like that's appropriate for them for whatever reason. So I'm going to share a suggested study course for the Headless Rite, aka a magical homework packet, if you will, that will walk people through the steps that I took to eventually create my own version of the Headless Rite, and people will also have the opportunity to do likewise if they want to. There's going to be 3 lectures about history and context, and the structure of invocation, and much more. We're also going to talk about the magician's voice, and I'll provide some thoughts and some tips that I've picked up by taking singing lessons and training my voice for magical purposes. There's also going to be 4 check-in sessions where participants can discuss their progress and touch base. And the final session will be an opportunity for participants to share about their work and reflect on what we've learned. We're going to be subverting some previous thinking about the tech, perhaps, and since we're going to be operating within the parameters of Void House, we're going to keep consent front and center and discuss the possible rewards and possible risks of getting into this rite and things like it. We'll also look at the ways that it, or any other type of intense activity, can potentially be used to manipulate or control people rather than empower them, so we're going to be taking a sort of big picture look at things as well. This is going to be the first time this course is offered, and because it's still sort of semi-experimental, I'm sure that there will be things that I learn and adapt and adjust based on the experience of this first time. Because this is the case, I'm going to be offering it for what I think is a pretty inexpensive price for this first time. I'm really, really stoked about it. I've gotten so much out of experimenting with the tech for a few years and doing research for like putting this class together and the rest of it, and I'm so excited to now be able to act as a guide for others as they pursue their own journey with it. As I said, this will probably be in a couple of months. The thing is pretty much all built out and the slideshows made and whatnot, but I am embarking on a pretty major transitory period involving relocation and the rest of it. So over the next couple months, I'm going to be preoccupied with that most likely. Registration will most likely be offered through Buy Me a Coffee, but I'm still kind of like figuring those logistics out. I will let you all know, but I wanted to put a bug in y'all's ear about it. If you'd like to send me thoughts, questions, comments, suggestions, or arcane revelations for the listener mail segment, you can reach me at luxoccultpod@gmail.com, at luxoccultpod on Instagram, or at luxestrada919 on Blue Sky Social. Speaking of which, let's go ahead and get into some listener mail and shoutouts here. Shout out and thank you to Luna from the Occult Confessions Discord. Shout out also to Rob, Olivia, and all of the alchemical actors as well. Luna was kind enough to share some thoughts with me about the most recent bonus episode of the show featuring Spencer Sunshine, author of Neo-Nazi Terrorism and Countercultural Fascism, about the issue of the far-right in satanic spaces. Luna responded with some thoughts disagreeing with the assertion that we shouldn't use dehumanizing language to describe people with stupid or harmful positions on things like racists or misogynists or bigots of other types. Luna and I sort of defined some terms for each other and clarified some thoughts, and I was actually thinking about including our whole interchange here, if for no other reason than to celebrate an instance of online debate being done respectfully and in good faith. But it turned out to be a lot more text than I realized, and it would have made for really awkward radio to like read it all here. But I do want to say how much I appreciate Luna listening, and also for taking the time to share thoughts and perspectives on this important topic. Also, in regard to the bonus episode with Spencer Sunshine, thanks to David for letting me know about Dead Domain's YouTube expose on the Satanic Temple. I put a link to it in the show notes in case people want to check it out. It's troubling stuff. I used to respect the Satanic Temple for some of the political work that they've done in the past surrounding issues like access to healthcare, but after being made aware of some of the behind-the-scenes stuff, they will get no fucking support from me of any kind. Fuck them. Fortunately, there are other, better satanic organizations out there. Shout out to the Satanic Circle. You can check out their work at thesataniccircle.org. Shout out also to Lance Criminal Galen, AV Arts, Angie, Black Shuck, Ankh Raven, Hot Teeth, and everybody who's been coming to the Tarot and Ruse classes that we've been rocking here locally. A hearty fuck yar to all the Pocket Wizards, Warboner, Spore Guy, and everybody in the We Are Aradia movement and worldwide magical resistance. Much love and much love to everybody participating in the Green Mushroom Project and Void House, regardless of what that looks like for you in your practice. Fuck yeah. Thanks so much to everybody who has reached out and who's been supporting the show by rating, reviewing, or giving on Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee. Whether or not it was featured, know that all of the misses I receive are much appreciated. You can support the show by telling friends, allies, and magical associates about it, as well as everybody that you meet at the next PTA meeting, choir rehearsal, bake sale, anarchist collective coffee clutch, seance, or ceremonial potluck you attend. You can also post about it on social media or write a positive review where that's possible. Both of these things are super helpful, so thank you so much to everybody who is doing so. And yes, don't forget to smash the fucking shit out of that follow button so that you can get updates when a new episode comes out. Alright, some final thoughts to leave y'all with here. And a lot of this very much harkens back to some of what Marcella shared in that conclusion of Healing the Liminal. It's always cool when we find examples of accessible tech that has shown to be effective, as is the case with what Marcella Kroll presents in the book Healing the Liminal. Whether or not we choose to think about the family tree as being a type of hypersigil or being adjacent to one, it's an example of something that begins in the liminal place of the mind, of intuition and visionary experience, and is translated through artistic and magical practice into changes in one's life and in one's world. As I mentioned when we spoke, I think it took a lot of bravery for Marcella to share about her personal experiences in an effort to offer something that would be useful to others. I know from firsthand experience how difficult that can be, and it can also be incredibly rewarding too, so fuck yeah. The concept of healing the liminal feels especially poignant to me at the current juncture where I now find myself. I'll use a tarot metaphor. I've been teaching about it lately, as I might have mentioned, so that system is sort of top of mind for me at the moment. I'll talk about the sequence of cards, the Tower, card 16, the Star, 17, the Moon, 18, and the Sun, 19. This is a powerful sequence here. We'll begin with card 16, the Tower, which usually depicts lightning striking a tower and it's cracking in half with people falling out of it. Like some type of natural disaster has happened by the looks of it, usually. For me in my own personal life right now, and this is of course informed in many ways by the greater things going on in the US and in the world. It's complicated as it always is, but in my own personal life there's been a sort of like tower card shakeup recently that changed the landscape I found myself in. And when we're standing amid the ruins of what used to be the old structures of authority or of stability, we can look up from the mess and for the first time see the Star card, which is number 17, which follows the Tower. So the Star card offers a hopeful new perspective that can show us the way forward. The star can be a guiding light to travelers and sailors, pretty literally actually in history, and those on all manner of quests. As we are guided by the star, we journey through the nighttime into the domain of the moon, which is card 18. This journey through the moon card's domain can be pretty confusing. The moon's light can sometimes obscure the star's guidance in an ever-shifting haze of illusions and dreams. And there's no telling when the sun card, which is 19, will appear, bringing with it the promise of delivering what we've been laboring or searching to bring into the world. The moon card on the particular journey I'm on has taught me a lot about becoming more comfortable with being uncomfortable. Not like in an enabling way where I'm ignoring my own boundaries or something like that. I've actually heard people talk about being comfortable with being uncomfortable in some ways that I would contextualize as being pretty abusive. What I'm talking about has more to do with dancing with whatever life throws at you and being more okay with uncertainty and duality and with stepping out of your comfort zone to accomplish new things. We don't know what proverbial towers might end up getting knocked down in our own lives, and being able to find the star amid the rubble can mean the difference between haunting the tower's ruins or moving on to somewhere better. We can resist the urge to just lay down and give up in the ruins of the tower by focusing on the light of the star, our guide through the murky confusion represented by the moon on our paths to better times. When the sun card rises and we see clearly the benefits and rewards of the hard work we have been doing, sometimes quietly or in unseen ways, it's like seeing a mushroom that sprung up overnight after a good rain. We know that underground there's been much effort and activity, these mycelial webs forming and all of the rest of it, but the results are not always visible. Although the results of our own efforts may not always be apparent, there's something to be said for continuing to work and to focus on a better future, sometimes quietly, waiting for the proverbial good rain to fall, for the sun card to rise and to shed light on the situation. I'll share with you now the Green Mushroom Project Statement of Resistance as I remind you that whatever it looks like for you in your own life and in your own reality, we can look amid whatever ruins of whatever towers we might find ourselves in for that light of the star card. And through the confusing journey represented by the moon card, we can have faith that the sun card will rise. And I will remind you to resist. Resist by maintaining sovereignty of the self. Resist by maintaining love of the self. Resist by maintaining fierce loyalty to love and pleasure. Resist with acts of radical kindness. Focus on the path to better times. Fuck yeah. Thanks so much to Marcella Kroll for joining me. Check out Healing the Liminal, available now from Sterling Ethos, New York. Check out the show description for links to all of Marcella's stuff as well. Thanks so much for the kind words and support for the show and my other work. Gratitude. Thank you to Hecate, The Void, and all of Team Unseen. And most of all, thanks so much to you for listening. Much love. This is Lux Estrada, reminding you to stay strong and stay fucking curious. And guard your mind. All right, I'm going to leave you all with a track I produced called Eyes of Your Eyes, featuring Folds and Floods from the XV Planets podcast. Cheers.
There's something very, very strange. Keep the headset on, see if it gets any stronger. Okay. Give us some weight. The notation is this is on a battery too. It's on a battery? Okay. Still has been removed. Okay. This is falling off it again. Yeah. Strange.
Do you have too much on your mind? Are your neural processes slowed by unused memories, cluttering up your Illumin Industries installed electro-bio-memory implant? With the Illumin Industries Memory Cloud service, you can upload these precious moments for preservation and enjoy them whenever and wherever you wish, without sacrificing operational speed. Something you'd rather never have to think about again? Users can tag and organize memories to allow for selective viewing. Only the best of memories. Memory Cloud, just another way Illumin Industries is making IT work for you. See Cybercatalog for important information about our privacy policy. Illumin Industries and its affiliates reserve the right to change these policies at any time without notice. Memory Cloud data is backed up daily, not responsible for lost or corrupted files. Must be Aluminum Select memory to use memory tagging feature. Remember.
Lux Occult is part of the Green Mushroom Podcast Network.
Levels.